so I've got 35 minutes to share a very complicated topic. I would prefer to read both chapters 21 and 22. We won't get there. We just don't have time. We're just going to look at a few verses. And we're going to talk about heaven. And we're going to talk about our reward, but I think you need to understand why God communicates that to you. There's a reason for it. And it's not just because it's a big payoff. It's we get a ticket punched. And it's especially not what the world talks about today. I've used this illustration many times, but truly, few people know how many funerals ministers go to. We go to more funerals than our fair share, and we deliver more funeral sermons than probably almost anything, even weddings. I'm challenged with our current view in our culture. If you go and you listen to what is said about the deceased, everyone gets into heaven. The kids are being told, yes, so-and-so, Grandma Myrtle, and if you have a Grandma Myrtle, forgive me, but Grandma Myrtle, she was abusive, she was mean as a snake, she never darkened the door of a church, but she's in heaven with Jesus. That's so contrary to what Scripture says. Or some old guy who beat his wife, he cheated on her, he kicked the dog, he shot the horse, he never darkened the door of a church, he didn't believe in Jesus, but he's in heaven. Have you noticed how we talk like that? It's so contrary to what Scripture says. And we're going to find out that it's truly contrary to what's said in the passage we read today. Now, I disagree with Mark Moore. He gave you only 3 verses to memorize. I would add verse 4. So if you did that just for me this week, I would memorize verses 1 through 4. We're going to talk about heaven, but think of it in the context of everything that we're dealing with today. So the two teams, I want to pick on the new guys. So can you come up and help me? Now, you have to introduce yourselves. Yes, I do that. I embarrass teenagers because I feel like God gave that as a gift for me. Yeah. So now, what's your name? Emma Bell. She has all the personality in the family, and I think she I'm not sure, but I think she knows what everybody else is supposed to do. Now, and what's your name? Am I right? Did I just give a proper assessment of your little sister? 50-50, okay.
He's being generous.
He's being generous. And now your name? Jonathan. So one of you take that, and the other just kind of stretch across. Here you go, Emma. This is your job over here. Just hold this on. Oh, actually, I think you need to. Yeah, let's switch around this way. So you go over here. Here you go. Yeah, see this? This is an old reproduction. This is a very, very old document. It's one of the books that I've got. And you notice it's just this big, giant timeline. That's supposed to be 4,000 years of the history. And that was the inspiration for this. So now you have the job of folding that up and going back to your seat. Yeah. Hey, let's give them a hand. So if we're going to talk about heaven and we're going to talk about Revelation, number one, you cannot understand Revelation without understanding every book that came before it, including the book of Genesis. And that timeline gives us an idea of understanding what we're going to be talking about today. Because if we're going to talk about Genesis, are you having troubles with that? It does require a college degree, just so you know. But if we're going to talk about Genesis, of course, we're going to be introduced to the topic of Eden, right? Oh, she's a perfectionist, too. Wow. Notice who, she says, get away from me, you who do not do this right. Jonathan. That's funny.
She wants to look perfect.
Yeah, look at that. That's okay. I put it up on my show. Yeah, that's okay. I'll get it. Yeah, thank you.
Yay!
I love teenagers. I just, now if you can imagine me subbing at the school system and I use that, yeah, the kids have no chance. I do this with object lessons too. So I do this sort of thing. I still remember one of the things I did with one sermon. I gave everybody in the church a red brick with God printed on the red brick, and then everybody had to carry it around with them for the rest of the week. Literally, they were taking pictures and posting it on Facebook, and there were church people that were in restaurants, and they were all over. One guy was a UPS driver, and he was carrying his red brick with God apostrophe S, that we are gods and we're living stones. Do you know where that comes from? Well, anyway, so I use object lessons just to make them stick. In order for us to understand heaven, the New Jerusalem, we need to remember Eden. But we really need to have a concept of eternity. And so this parachute cord represents, if you just think of that, there not being a wall there, and that cord goes on and on and on forever. And the same thing for the future. It just goes on and on and on forever. And that's God's venue. That is where God is. He is eternal. He is eternity. But we as human beings really just know things from Eden to the promise of the New Jerusalem. But in order to understand the New Jerusalem, in order to understand what God talks about when he talks about heaven, when he talks about our ultimate reward, we really can't help but understand what Eden is about. And interestingly enough, the passage we're reading today fills in a lot of that. So Revelation chapter 21, verse 1 goes like this. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. Mark and I disagree on this. He says he thinks it refers to a literal sea. I think it's representing that distance between us and God. That there's no longer any separation between us and God. There's no longer that void. And the words that used there has that dual meaning. I saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God." To me, that's one of the most beautiful passages in Scripture. Because God is reminding us what he desires from us and for us. He created us for for Eden. He created us for that, but we rejected it. We kicked ourselves out, basically. And this little distance in between, and it's not perspective, it's, truth is, human history probably, on an eternal perspective, could be a little tiny section right in here. I'm just expanding it out. This is our rebellion period. And that's what the rest of the Bible talks about, is our rebellion period. Notice it's also halfway in between the cross, because what changed history was the cross. Because as long as we did not have the cross, we were out of Eden, and all we knew and all humanity would have would be destruction without God's salvation, without grace and mercy. So that is the promise. That's what God has built for us for the future. And notice what he says. I mean, truly, notice what he says at verse 3. It's so beautiful. I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God." I think it's beautiful because if you're going to study Scripture, you study who is speaking, to whom they're speaking, but you also think about the when, the where, the how. It is likely written between AD 94 and AD 96. It's written by John. He's the last of the apostles. Everyone else is dead. All that's left of the original 12 that were with Jesus is John. And there was a rumor, and it wasn't true, obviously. There was a rumor that Jesus would return while those apostles were still alive. And here it is. It's the end of the century, or it's the end of a long period of time. John saw Jesus resurrected 34 to 36 years earlier. 64 to 66 years earlier. And he was likely a teenager, so he's an old man at this point. And the worst thing was, of all the evil emperors that they had seen in Rome, one of the worst was was on the throne and was about to start persecuting the church like never before. And we had seen persecutions. But Domitian was the emperor at this time, and things were going to get really bad. And what we know from history, but also from the book of Revelation, is there's 9 emperors who follow him who are even worse than he is. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'm a human being and I'm relying upon the promise of Jesus, and I've got maybe a little falsehood behind me, and that is that Jesus is coming back like in a couple of days, and then it doesn't happen and it doesn't happen, would you be demoralized? Would you be despondent? Would you start to kind of question your faith? So the book of Revelation is given to us, and please I'm not saying burn the books, but all those books that just talk about it and there's helicopters, and no. This is written to a people who are going to be persecuted. They're going to be tromped on. They're going to be thrown to lions. They're going to be cut in two by gladiators. These people are going to suffer. And when you talk about suffering and losing your rights in the United States, you have no idea what that is like. You have absolutely no idea. Compare it to them. And then whine about today. And you probably won't if you really compare to them. And so Revelation is written for the purpose of lifting those spirits and saying something better is coming, and you're going to get through it, and all this stuff is going to happen, but guess what? God wins. And here's the best part. We have it in our minds that we're the ones who are supposed to do the battle, but if we really read Scripture, you know what we're supposed to do? We're supposed to stand, Ephesians. We're supposed to be there. We're supposed to preach the gospel. God does the fight, and He's the one who wins. He's the one who's victorious. I don't know about you, but if I'm in a bully fight and the bully is bigger than me, the guy I want fighting for me, I want bigger than the bully. And you can't get bigger than God. Can you? And that's the whole beauty of Revelation. So with that context in place, that historical context, again, look at those first 3 verses. There's a new heaven and a new earth. Everything that we've worked, everything that we touched here, everything is corrupt. It's so corrupt that it's going to be tossed out. A new heaven and a new earth. Why? Because we royally messed this up. And we've had, in the midst of this little history right here, we've had the arrogance to believe that we could always do things better. You know, all we have to do is get the opposing party out of office and we're going to do better because we're going to create a perfect society. And in my time period, in the time period I've lived in, Richard Nixon was going to destroy the United States and we're still here. Jimmy Carter was going to destroy the United States, and we're still here. JFK was going to destroy the United States, and we're still here. Bush 1 and Bush 2 were going to destroy the United States, and we're still here. Clinton was going to destroy the United States, and we're still here. Obama was going to destroy the United States, and we're still here. Trump was going to destroy the United States, and we're still here. I mean, that's crazy, isn't it? First of all, that we think we're going to create a perfect society. We're not, ever. Ever. And so this, between Eden and between New Jerusalem, what's the purpose? Why is God sticking around? God making us stick around? And why do we need that as a reminder? Verse 4. We really need to read verse 4. Let's read it. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. Not only does God want to be our God, and for us to be His people, do you see the beauty of what's going on there? Let me put it in my perspective. I just turned 62. And the truth is, if I put me on this, and I can't even do this, isn't even proper perspective. So I'm right there. Can you see it? How many can see it? That's me. And just as one of those wake-up calls about you and how important you are, you're in there too. Can you see you? That's your life. In just the span of human history,